Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Better Opinion, where our opinions are better than yours. This has confused some commenters, as they seem to have thought they were on the Commenters Opinion Matters channel. It doesn't. I am Kevin, and this is my co-host, Mansur. Mansur, what's up, buddy?
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, I've never met you before.
Yeah.
We've never talked.
First time.
Yeah, but today we're going to talk about the economy.
Are we?
Yeah, we are.
We haven't talked about this.
We've never talked about the economy before, and it is important.
Yes.
It's the most important.
Okay. So we're talking about the economy in relation to the H-1.
Yeah, so for context, we were talking about this on Discord the other day a little bit, and you watched that video Sam Hyde put out, and I saw people shitting their pants online about Sam Hyde, saying like he's a Nazi or something, like a neo-Nazi. I guess Asmongold's a neo-Nazi according to some people. Don't get me wrong, Asmongold is not what I would call a source for high-quality information, but I don't know if he's really going to be the next Hitler.
Well, what the H-1 visas are is just an excuse to get cheaper labor that will do more for you, and they will not decline you because of how shit their situation is. That it's just an excuse to get people who will work for you at like better efficiency because they don't have a choice.
Yeah, so H-1B is the visa, at least when you read the description, is a visa for a specialized worker.
Yeah.
So someone who is like, I don't want to use the term expert, but for lack of a better term, like a specialist in a field, like they understand something that is a rarer thing to find. I don't know. Let's say operation of Large Hadron Colliders, right? There's probably like 10 people who can do that. You know what I mean? So that's the idea of the visa, is it's someone who is outside the country, who's specialized, and so they get to come here to work. But the complaint that I'm seeing online from people is that that's work that Americans should do.
I don't think it's really that work that they're concerned about. It is like, because I'm working in the development field. I meet a lot of the people who are using these H-1B visas, and I'll be very frank. They've told me the only reason that they're still at the job that they are at is because they're kind of being held hostage
By the visa.
By the visa. If they were to leave, it's like
they'd have to even if they move to the same field, they'd have to get the visa all over again.
They'd have to get the visa all over again, or they'd have to go home.
Right. Well, they'd have to go home, get the visa, and come back. I knew a guy like that at my old job. It was actually Michael's old boss was here on a work visa, that if he were to leave the company, he'd have to go home, get the visa again, and then come back. So I know a lot of the controversy that I've seen online. So I think, you kind of went more in depth when we were talking about it before. It seemed like you went a little bit more in depth on the actual situation, whereas I saw more of what people, I mean, I read the definition of the visa. I watched some of that video. But the problem that people are having, at least what I'm seeing online, is sort of this same sort of anti-immigrant mentality. But the thing is that what's interesting is people who were anti-immigrant, like Musk, this part of that group, now all of a sudden no, they're great.
Well, because he benefits from the H-1B
obviously.
visa. And I'll be honest, I don't disagree with this because necessarily the anti-immigrant sentiment. I believe work should be more universal in general. I disagree with it because this is something Bernie Sanders has put out earlier. It's just an excuse to not have to follow labor standards.
Right.
It's just an excuse for you to get labor that is cheaper. It may produce the same object, but you don't have to treat the worker as well. Yeah. And I'll be very frank, if you had to put the same amount of effort to treat an H-1B visa worker as you did someone who lived in U.S. soil, then companies wouldn't be as happy about promoting it.
Right. Well, because it would actually be more convenient in many cases, to find someone who's already a U.S. citizen if the standards were identical. Yeah. Right? So immigration is an interesting subject for me because I'm a progressive, for lack of a better term. I don't know. Labels don't make a whole lot of sense, but I guess when it comes to social issues, I tend to be more progressive. And immigration is an interesting one because I think that when we talk about it, it's always this blanket thing, right? Like it's either there's too much or it's a great thing and it makes everything better. And I don't think either of those statements are necessarily true because it's different based on what the thing is that is causing immigration. It's also different based on locale.
Yeah.
Some areas like rural middle of nowhere towns really benefit from, young, like let's say Mexicans or Central Americans who deeply want to work and they bring their whole family to middle America and like start working on a farm. Those people not only end up being like pillars of their communities, but they end up being like really happy too with their situation. And their situation, I remember one of it was there's this guy, he hired this guy and let him and his family live on his property. And they had like a mobile home put in. And the guy and his family lived there. And then the Fed came in and was like, well, this land isn't labeled for residents. So this is illegal. Right. And, but he was just like, well, he works here. So I just let him live here for free. Right. Like, and he works really hard and he's like he's been with my business for so long, but I couldn't afford to pay for him to have a house, but I can afford to have him just live on the empty space.
Yeah.
Right. And so like those situations, that's like, you're talking about anti-immigration is hurting not only the community and the farmer, but the family that moved in, that immigrated. So these two things are good, right?
Yeah.
And then in the inverse, though, you have places where, for the sake of cheap immigration, they bring in a lot of people from another country who have no American values, and they bring them all together, and because they're cheaper, because they're cheaper labor, they'll do the same work for less.
Yeah.
And those people move in, and not only do they drive down wages, but they don't adhere to American culture. We talked about this in like a much older episode that like culture is not race, right? So like you and I, we have some different culture, right? I'm originally from the West Coast. You're originally from the Middle East. Well, your family is. You're not, but your family is, right? And so but we meet at American culture. We're both Americans. And we have a lot of similar values in that way as the way we engage with society.
Yeah.
And when people have a lot of people from their one culture all in a location, they don't feel a need to adhere to local culture. Right. So what happens is you get a bunch of these, like, let's say from India, a bunch of workers from India, and they all move into one town because of all the tech companies there. And then they don't feel a need to adhere to American culture. And that's where a lot of that complaint comes from. And then people label that racism, but it's not really about race. It sounds like it's about race. But if all those Indian people were from Nebraska and grew up in Nebraska and they're 10 generations Nebraskans and they moved to Silicon Valley or wherever,
it would still be the same problem.
Well, they wouldn't. It might, because I don't know how bad Nebraskan culture is compared to, like, I don't know, California, right? But people wouldn't be saying, they might not have as big of issues because they're Americans. They're Americans. They're very American, and a lot of their sort of social tics and macro social behaviors would be more American. Now, people might still get annoyed if there's a lot of immigrants and they're the kind of person who only sees people who look different than them, but oftentimes when you start asking people what's wrong, they don't describe skin color, they don't describe race, they describe culture without even realizing it.
It's interesting because when I saw the H-1B visa problem, that was completely out of my mind. That was not a thing I thought was concerning in terms of it, because a lot of work now is remote work. They might not even move to the U.S. So it was more the idea of the treatment of a worker, and as you've shown me this guy Sam Hyde, his recent video feels like people are being treated more as economic units more than they are people.
Right. Yeah. So this is interesting. So first off, I don't really I'm not like a Sam Hyde faithful. I don't actually know a ton about him. What I know about him is usually like shitpost videos on YouTube, like him making fun of like the day in the life of a Sigma grind set, like thing.
Yeah, when I saw his video, it was very interesting in that I had no idea what the hell he was saying half the time.
Yeah.
Or if he meant half the things he said, but I still felt like there were some things he said that were worth thinking about.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Sam Hyde's an interesting sort of test subject, I guess would be the example, or sample. Yeah, good sample for one of the problems with the internet. Because Sam Hyde, from what I know, right, and I want to clarify, the reason I'm clarifying this so much is that it's one of those times where I'm talking about a person that I really haven't consumed much of. So here's what I know about him. He's the kind of person who would like go to like a progressive rally and then just say he's a member of the KKK. And he isn't. I don't know if he is or is not, but I'm saying he'd say that just to then like see the reactions while he's interviewing someone, right? Like it's kind of like Sacha Baron Cohen being Borat and just saying some insane shit, right? I don't know how true. It's like how much of what he says is true. I don't know, because he's like a shitpost comedian. That's how he got famous, is just saying insane schizophrenic stuff. But what's interesting is that I agree. There were things that he said that were good points to make. And this is a common problem online, and that's why I say he's a good sample for this, is because he's so ludicrous. You have no clue what his actual alignment is, and yet he made some points that it's like, oh, that's an interesting point. And then everyone who disagreed with him or didn't like him started calling him a neo-Nazi, and say, well, this is what the neo-Nazis, Stephen Vanell was like, well, this is what these neo-Nazis do. And I've said this to you before, I think I said in a past episode, if Hitler apparated into this room right now and said, did you know gravity is real? Yeah, do we all just start to fly into space because someone you don't like said something that was true?
Yeah.
Like, I don't like anything about Hitler or agree with anything he said, but gravity is real. And that doesn't change just because I hate Hitler.
Yeah, I think the funny thing is if you watch Sam Hyde, he says things that pisses both progressive and conservative people. And I feel like both sides are blind to that idea that what this person will piss off both sides.
You gotta. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Listen,
your microphone is eternally wrong.
It's the magic mic.
It is. It's the magic. Well, that's the magic mic. He's over there. Yeah, you're good. You're good. Just leave it. I got it. I can see. I can see its alignment. I know whether it's chaotic evil, chaotic good. Well, that's up and down. You know what I mean.
Okay, so where was I? He is someone who will just, it feels like, say shit just for the sake of it, as you've said. And it's interesting to see because it feels like people who are too caught up in their own rhetoric will just be blind to like the parts that people like that agree with them.
Well, isn't that what everyone always is? Yeah, people are always caught up in their own rhetoric. Right? Like,
except for Andrew Tate. He only lies when it's convenient to you. Except for him.
Oh my God! Don't get me started. I haven't talked. I'm glad he fell into irrelevancy, which I knew he eventually would. But yeah, it is funny how Andrew Tate can just say, "I am a pimp. This is how you pimp," and then later, years later, he'll say, that was all a joke," and people who like him are just like, "That's so true. Oh my God, he was joking. He's actually not a pimp." Yeah, because he said he wasn't later.
It's so insane. It is crazy. He's been undercover this whole time.
Undercover, saying he was a pimp, teaching pimping classes online.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but like people are caught up in their rhetoric. It was. You see that. I mean, you see that in the comments section. I never expected my like super milquetoast, like I'm disappointed in Joe Rogan opinion to be so. I didn't even expect people to find it, right? Like. We're a nobody channel.
Because it's very weird. Because
I was still right.
You were still very nice to Joe Rogan. It felt like, except for like that one part about like World War III being the part where he kind of turned you. It felt like you were giving him a lot of It's like a lot.
Yeah, because I idolized him. Yeah, like, so he disappointed me. It's my idol disappointed me. Yeah, and he still does. My opinion didn't change.
Yeah, the better opinion.
Yeah, I have a better opinion.
It felt like you were giving him a lot of, what do you call it? God damn it.
Credit, charity.
A lot of charity for a stupid thing that he said.
Yeah.
And I'll be very frank. It's very surprising that people are.
I was funny when the guy called me a neoconservative. I was like, that's a. I don't know where that. Do labels even mean anything anymore?
Well, isn't what Joe Rogan said a conservative stance? Am I?
Most of his opinions are conservative stances. Yes.
So,
but they said I'm pro-war, which I don't. Do people even know what that? Here's the thing. I don't actually care. I was so excited. This is a total non sequitur from what we were talking about, but but the reason I brought it up is because that comment section is a perfect example of like I am so railroaded on my own rhetoric that I have no clue what I'm even reacting to, because like the idea of being pro-war, right? Pro-war is that you want war. Right? Yeah. For one reason or another, you want it to exist. I don't want war. I would like Russia to leave.
Yes.
And for the war to just not happen.
Well, here's the thing. We want the retaliation against Russia so that less war happens.
Yeah. If they retaliate, then hopefully Russia will run out of resources and give up.
Yeah.
Right? That's the anti-war stance is I'd like the defender to win so that the attacker goes away.
And that other attackers see that it doesn't work out.
Right, because here's the thing. China constantly looks at Russia to see, can I win Taiwan? That's what they're doing. They're going, is it possible as the global underdog economically and, firepower-wise, can I win this if the rest of the world says don't do it? Ukraine is an example of don't do it.
And North Korea sent their most decorated soldiers to get destroyed.
Which was pretty cool. Yeah, it was pretty. I wish I had my glasses and show everyone how cool that is.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean, right? Labels don't mean anything anymore, right? It's just all rhetoric. It's just words. You're a Nazi, you're a neocon, you're pro-war, you're a liberal, you're a cuck. None of these things mean anything. Mm-hmm. I actually remember one time a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, he was telling me how a friend of his was watching our stream that we do, right? When we play games together. And one of his friends was watching it, and his friend's sister said, "Oh, you watch them? Yeah, why? What's the problem?" "Well, they're just a bunch of incels." Now, incel means involuntary celibate.
Yes.
All of us are actively having sex, and two of us are in like super long-term relationships. So I'm just trying to figure out what that means. What does it mean?
Well, I don't think the people using these words have. They're not the wizard who was there when the words were first made.
Yeah, that's the point. Right?
They were not. Who is his name? Aslan.
I don't know.
The tiger from
you mean Tiger or Lion Jesus?
Lion Jesus, yeah.
Yeah.
If people don't know where that comes from, don't cite to me the old words, which.
yeah. No, it's they don't know. Rhetoric means something in their mind that has almost nothing to do with what's actually being said.
Yeah, it's a language thing. Connotation means much more than denotation, and the connotation has diverged in such a weird way that's just an insult instead of any of the nuance that was in the word before.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what happens with. I mean, we're seeing that even in our original what our original topic is, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think people, they don't understand the difference between like explicit and implicit. There's explicitly what you like. Someone say, "Show me where blank said blank," and it's like, well, that doesn't matter. The implication of what they're saying, even if they didn't intend it, is what is being received, right? So you can say one thing, but what you're saying, the implicit statement is that something else is the result. So if I say, a good example is like the CEO shooter that we talked about, right? So a lot of the arguments I'm seeing around it are there is a it shouldn't happen, right? We live in a society with a legal system. It was Stephen Bennell said this. I only watched like half an episode because he's like really, I don't know, he's boring now. But like he was saying that like, you know, we live in a society with a legal system, and so we should address it that way, not by shooting people. And it's like, okay, listen, we shouldn't go around killing each other. That is a true statement.
Yeah.
What can also be said is nobody is solving the problem, and this is the result of that.
Yeah. The biggest...
But not to interrupt you, but to say the implicit part, when you say we shouldn't do this, and the point has been brought up, but nobody is addressing it, and nobody has the means to address it, is you are implying that then it should stay the same. And you might say, well, that's not what I mean. And I go, but that's the implicit result. Because
the problem is going through all the regular channels. This has been a problem for how long? Decades?
Yeah.
And I don't think if you talk to any reasonable person, anyone is going to tell you that the healthcare system is fair.
Oh, and working.
And fair and working for the people.
Yeah.
And it has been this way for decades. And I'm sure they're like politicians. I know Bernie Sanders is working to try to fix this. I know that he has personally done things in the community to help people get abortions, even when abortions were banned.
Yep.
So there are people who are working for it. But how many people need to how many lifespans do you need to go through? How many people who the healthcare system willfully ignores? Because here's the thing, the healthcare system is technically not failing because they're doing what they're
providing money to the economy.
They're providing money to the economy, which seems to be their primary purpose right now.
Yeah, not helping you.
It is not. It's not to help you, and that's a huge problem in terms of society. Especially in like terms of this H-1B visa, bringing it all around. We talked about this before. It feels like the number one thing that we're worried about is the economy instead of the people's welfare. It's the government, not for we the people, for the people, etc. It's the government for the economy, because somehow we're under this weird belief that if the economy is doing all right, everyone will be taken care of. But even if the economy is doing well, people are still fucking dying to care both fucking.
You know what? Yeah, if like that's a good point. That's a great point, because it's like how many lifetimes, how many people have to die, how many generations? It's like, okay, you know what? I could, and I'm not advocating for this, but I understand the thought process is like, if we just executed everyone who is part of the problem, there would be chaos, but it would be a fix. It would be a change.
Yeah.
Not a fix. It would be a change. Something would change. But if we try to do it the legal way, well, our entire government is being run by oligarchs right now. You know, everyone elected Trump because they were mad about the way the system is now, and they see the Democrats as the system, which I can empathize with. And Trump is actually going to be the system. He's just going to be the other side of the system. He's going to, instead of the politician system, he's going to bring in the oligarchs system that already exist and run our society, and he's going to put them in more power. And you elect these people, and then you go, okay, I'm going to fight that. Now I'm going to fight them. Right? How many generations do I have to fight before this problem that hasn't been solved in multiple generations? How many people have to die? How many people have to be unhappy? The desire to just blow the whole thing up is one that is not, while I wouldn't agree with it, it is one that a reasonable person who is sound of mind would come to.
Because it's interesting. Luigi is going to spend his entire life in jail, but I feel like what he did right now in this one moment probably did more for this conversation than spending his entire life campaigning legally would have done.
Wouldn't it be funny if just some millennial who always liked him ended up becoming president and just pardoned him halfway through his sentence?
I mean,
I'm just saying, the president has that power. They could just do it.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. You're absolutely right. And that's the thing about these arguments. And when we talk about the economy, and that goes back to the immigration thing, is a lot of people are upset, and they're just upset, right? And this is the thing we forget. And we attack them. right? And when I say we, I mean the government, the influencers, whoever, or they're a weapon to be wielded, right? So when someone says the price of eggs is $1 bajillion, whether that's true or not, what's happening is these things that people consider a staple of their life that everyone has, like who doesn't have eggs, right? They look at that and they go, this is upsetting. Whether it's upsetting in a way that's like, because like people will say, oh, well, people are having to live paycheck to paycheck. And they go, if you're ordering Uber Eats twice a week, you're not living paycheck to paycheck. You know what? That's true. But the statement that's being made is that before it felt like I had a future and now it feels like I don't. Or my children or whoever, my grandchildren, there is a complaint, right? There is a complaint, and no amount of saying you are wrong will fix that complaint. You have to address the problem itself, not what's being said. And nobody wants to do that. So when people say they're upset at immigration, what they really mean is they're upset at a system where it feels like the people in power, like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever, is outsourcing money to an exploitable demographic at the cost of the American people. Right? Yeah. So that cost can be, like I mentioned, cultural. A lot of the racism I see usually ends up being a large immigration body, causes people in a locale to be mad at the cultural change of their locale. Whether you think that's good or bad is irrelevant. That's what the complaint is. When I see a lot of arguments about immigration for taking jobs, it's because people feel like jobs that give them what they need are not available. And so when immigrants take those jobs, they're upset about that. Right. They may, people may say, well, you were never going to take that job or you're not qualified. Doesn't matter. This is what the complaint is. Now, you could say the immigrants are not any of these problems. And maybe that's true. Yeah. But what's the actual complaint? That's what needs addressing. The actual complaint is that people don't feel that they have good benefits, good health care, good income, that they can own a home, and that they can leave that home to their children. You want to talk about birth rates? I don't know about you, but I don't live in an environment that'll be good for having kids.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. Is like, you should have kids, but like, what will my kid have?
Right. Like, what am I going to do? Like, struggle? I don't want to struggle for 20 years to try to give them an all right life. I want to be happy.
So that they can struggle too.
Yeah, I want to be happy and have my kid be happy. I don't want to have to. You might say, well,
They should know the you know what?
Oh yeah, the children should know the grind. We got to send them to the mines.
Yeah, it's like,
legalize child labor.
They should know the grind that means to be successful. Who are the alpha grind set? Well, 10 hours a day. If your job's only 8 hours, you need to work 3 more hours or something to truly be successful in life. Are you really making anything of yourself?
Do you think let me ask you something. I mean, I know the answer to this, but I want to sort of state it out loud. What do you think about the fact that whenever like you listen to really successful people, or you listen to anyone really, it didn't even have to be successful. They can just be like a retired old guy, right, with like a broken spine. They always are like, when you say, I really wish I could only work like 6 hours a day, 4 days a week, they're like, you're lazy and that's bad. And it's like, well, what should I do? Well, I work 10-hour days, 5 days a week. Okay, why should I want to do that? I understand that you felt you needed to do that to achieve the result you're at. But why should I want that for myself? What do you think about that statement?
I think it's like, you remember when we talked about how it feels like poor people only empathize with, it's like only are nice to rich people because they feel like
one day they're going to be that guy.
Yeah, it feels like that's kind of what they're going for. Is like, if I work very hard, then I'll be, I don't know, some idol that they see is like some amazing thing. It feels like they need to justify the stuff that they did, that they have in some way done something amazing. Otherwise, they've wasted 10 hours a day.
Yeah, they're having to justify their own behavior.
Because I'll be very frank, it sounds like it's such a miserable life. It's like, if you're not at least proud of how hard you work, how could you be happy with wasting that many hours of your life?
Well, because what we do is that we take young people and we raise them with this constant idea that the goal in life is to get a job and make money and then buy a house and work. And, you know, like if you remember all the cartoons and sitcoms, I mean, things changed now in the most recent years because of just like the change in who's making it. But for when I was growing up, it was always like a nuclear family. The dad worked all day. He came home. He was tired, stay at home mom, right? And what we were doing is essentially culturally creating a workforce who sees spending the majority of your life working, and then you get 10, 20 years before you die where you don't have to work at the end. That's your reward, right?
It's weird to think that this is an invented thing too. People don't understand. The idea of a nuclear family was invented by, I think, the U.S. government, just to kind of have people have a sense of what normal should be.
Right.
There were even ads of like, hey, Jimmy, you should be one of the cool kids. You shouldn't do all this nerd shit, idiot.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So when you spend a lot of your young years partying, traveling, you know, and you don't grind, everyone goes, well, you wasted your young years and now you're paying for it when you're older. And I go, you know, I think when I look back, I go, I should have done even less work and should have traveled and done things, because now I'm getting older. I'm starting to get gray hairs, and it's like I'm not better off. If I had worked even harder, I wouldn't actually be more free now.
Well, I think the problem is why do you need people to work this much? What is happening from all this work that is benefiting society? That it's like, what is 10 hours of a day really getting anyone except a billionaire more money? It's like, what? It's like, what is like John Mann doing busing for like one extra dish doing? Can't you just like, you can have two people? It's like, we have enough people who are jobless. You could have two different people do 4-hour shifts.
Yeah.
And like, what do you lose?
Well, the only thing is the income of, so like for a restaurant, right? Like you could have two people do 4-hour shifts, but then like at like bussing a table, for example, but that one person wouldn't earn enough money, right? And companies do that so that they don't have to pay benefits.
Yeah, that's like a different problem. And I do think people should just earn a livable wage.
Oh yeah. Well, so here's the thing. And I can sort of imagine, I can like steel man the argument for this because it's always engaged on a super simplistic level.
Yeah.
People always engage with this stuff from like the very surface level rather than going deep. This is actually, I told my friend about this. I said, because we were laughing about that comment section. He said, well, you're always going to get these reactions from politics. And I said, but that's not what this show's actually about. This show's about forming better opinions by talking about the deeper thing here, and the deeper thing, not to I'll let you say, but the deeper thing here is that there's a fundamental flaw with the way we view the meaning of life.
Yeah, because the biggest problem is what the hell are we doing in this country? Isn't it? I forget who said it. The idea of the U.S. is that you're supposed to be able to like go towards the pursuit of happiness.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, they want you to pursue it. They don't ever want you to get it.
Why? What does like a man working 10 hours a day really contribute anything to anyone other than making the man miserable and making like one person happier? Is like, and that one guy being miserable makes not only them miserable, but their wife, their children, how many other people who are related to them. What do we really want from this country? Because from my mind, the government should be going towards making people happy.
Yeah.
Not companies happy. Companies are not people, as much as people would like to.
Citizens United says that they are.
Well, Citizens United can
go away. It should go away.
Fuck itself. If there's one thing that I'm racist against, it's against companies.
I hate the race of corporations.
Yeah, the corporate race should.
Dude, is this cyberpunk? Are we just talking about corpos?
The saddest thing about cyberpunk is that watching through it and seeing all the shit that happens with the main character in healthcare is like, damn, that would just happen if
that
they
would
could.
just happen. Yeah,
It's like, this isn't even like,
it's not even a joke.
It's not even a joke. That's just what's gonna happen.
Sorry, you don't have enough money, so
You don't have enough
mom.
money to visit your mom.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have enough money to visit your mom.
That is like, and the sad part is, I think they would do that if they could.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's the core question. So what it is, and that goes to the Luigi thing, that goes to the visas thing.
Yeah.
What's happened is people are unhappy. They're unhappy, and no one is addressing it. So we can talk about the morality and the racism and the Nazis, and we can talk about all these things.
But it's
wrong to kill.
But
Who cares?
The problem with all these things is all these things that we're arguing are all made up fucking things. They're not real. They're invented by someone, and we can fucking change them.
We could change things, but no one's going to.
Well, no one wants to leave their comfort zone. The strangest thing is that it's like too many people are afraid of moving their mind around. Because the biggest problem with this government is that it's too fucking stiff. It needs to like bend with the times.
Well, I can tell you why. It's because a bunch of rich old oligarchs are all the politicians.
Yeah.
AOC didn't get that chair position because they put a guy dying of cancer actively in the hospital in the position instead. Right? The DNC took they did an internal vote, and they decided an old man dying of cancer was more powerful and good for the DNC.
Well, they were
than the young person who's one of the best communicators in their faction.
Well, because they were more comfortable with him.
Right. Well, because he's going to help them keep doing what they've always done, which is just rake in money.
Yeah.
Because that's what they want. It's Nancy Pelosi and all the rich lifers who've just been doing it forever. They just want to keep raking it in. That's all it is. Our politicians are no longer interested in politics. They're interested in using the government to continue to line their own pockets.
And it's the same thing from healthcare. It's like it's the same thing with every company that's like going open and everything. It's that we are no longer the customer. We do not matter to them as much as them increasing their profits. And because we no longer matter, they don't have to make things nice for us anymore.
Yep.
In fact,
the enshittification of everything.
In fact, making things shittier is in their interest.
Yeah.
Because if you make bureaucratic things more impossible to deal with, why would we go through with them? If you can just sue someone, and the fact that you sued them makes you win.
Yeah, it's not even you were losing. You would have lost the lawsuit, but the person you're suing doesn't have the means to defend themselves.
And even if they won, they would have still died because they would have been bankrupt. And
exactly. This is, oh my God, I talk about this in private all the time. Our legal system is one where the only time that the system guarantees that you get something is when you are on criminal trial. If someone sues you, you have to respond to the lawsuit. You have to do something. So you have to spend money because the system will not provide you a lawyer because it's civil. Right? And so that's going to be expensive because lawyers are for profit, and lawyers are even the nicest lawyers have been hardened. Right? And so very few of them work for free. Some do, but that's usually pro bono work for criminal cases. You're not going to find a civil lawyer who's going to do it for free. And then maybe, and right to a speedy trial, that doesn't even exist for criminals. It definitely doesn't exist in civil court. So you're going to spend a ton of money, and it's going to take 5-10 years, and you're not going to be able to do what you were doing before you were sued because you're going to spend all of your time, and that's if they sue you, right? So you're locked up in this lawsuit, all your money, your time, your energy.
And they just throw like people at you. They don't even have to be part of it.
No, they don't show up because they're wealthy and rich, so they just send representatives. But you have to because you're a nobody, right? So you go through.
They probably already forgot about it.
Exactly, and so that's why slap suits exist, and only some states. Do you know what a slap suit is?
Yeah,
So a slap suit, in simple terms, is when you sue someone simply because you don't like what they said, and you are in the wrong, but you just know that they don't really, that likely they will not have the means to defend themselves, right? So, you know, rich people love to use slap suits as just a punishment for criticism, because it's like, well, I'm going to sue you, and you're not even going to take it to court probably, right? And if you decide to, I'll drop it, right? But you had to waste time. The punishment is that you had to waste time and money, and that's what the legal system is now. And it is for everything. You know, you don't get a fair trial when you're a criminal because the prosecutor isn't interested in justice. They're interested in convictions. The legal system in and of itself doesn't care about the causes of the problem. It only cares about what the law says. So a judge is only going to sentence you based on what the law says. They might be lenient. They might be that guy in Rhode Island who's famous on YouTube and has a fucking soul, but they're not interested in justice. They're interested in the law. So the majority of the time, they're still just going to follow the law. So it's like, oh, this crime was caused by poverty and lack of education. Well, we're not going to solve that. We're going to send you to jail or take your money or both. Well, now I'm even more poor, right? And so, you know, when the legal system doesn't exist to solve our problems. It exists to try to navigate the law, and it's underfunded. Right? It makes its own money, which is why it's so expensive, is because the courts get court fees, right? That's how they run. Because we're not, all of our money, everyone's complaining about our deficit, none of that goes to the legal system.
You know, the funny thing is when people were talking about how Trump has done something illegal, is I kept hearing a bunch of people was like, well, hasn't everyone done something kind of illegal, you know, gone through a bit of a loophole?
No.
And it was like such a what the fuck, like...
Well, you know what was funny? I was arguing with someone saying he's a convicted felon. It was a family member. And then they were like, no, he wasn't convicted. And I just Googled, was he convicted of a felony? And it just said yes. And then I looked at the legal document and it said convicted of felony charges. The difference is that because he's powerful, he's not going to do any jail time. He's been convicted and there will be no punishment because he's president now. And it's not because the law says that. The state could totally just put him in prison. They can do that. But they're not going to because he's president now. Right? And so people don't even give a shit about the law, right? But the legal system is just completely broken, and it's designed to be in the favor of the rich and to the detriment of the poor. And that is our whole system as we have it now. And that shouldn't be a hot take. Like you said, we should be able to just change these things, but who's going to do it? You and I can't. I'd love to. Listen, if God showed up right now and said, I'm giving you this power, you can just make shit happen, I would totally fix these problems, but I don't have the means. The most I can do is make this podcast that gets, 30 views unless we talk about something super hot.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are like 30, like 10 or something politicians who've like worked their entire lives to not do any progress on these issues.
Oh yeah. They spend all of their time making sure it doesn't happen. And then they get elected again. Mitch McConnell's had fucking strokes live on camera. And then they're like, guess what? Half his brain's broken, but he's back. We're going to elect this stroked out man and this cancer patient to run our government. Good moves, right? How about this dried out, leathery old fat man who loves money and himself? That's a good president. We don't need young people. We don't need innovation. Did you keep up with Andrew Yang back when he was running?
No.
The thing is that Andrew Yang is not perfect. And I would say he's kind of fallen out of grace now. I feel like he's just kind of spinning his wheels. And I kind of look at him and I go, okay, yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, more yapping. But when he was running, his platform was on the idea that we need UBI because people aren't going to be universal basic income because AI and automation are going to make a lot of people irrelevant. And they're going... And this is inevitability, and that the system as it is going to move further and further away from a worker-based economy, and it's going to be harder and harder, and that our economy itself can't survive if this many people find themselves this impoverished. And the other day, I watched a side-by-side comparison of the first time someone made an AI-generated video of Will Smith eating spaghetti and one that they made very recently where it's just a very close resemblance to Will Smith just scooping and eating pasta verbatim. It's not perfect. His face shifts a little bit, so it doesn't quite just looks like some other black guy. Well, but it is so close to just a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti.
Is come out of nowhere.
Yeah. And it's like, this is going to continue. And it doesn't mean it's good. Doesn't mean AI is good or that AI produced products are good, but more and more ways to make people irrelevant in some ways will exist.
Well, because the problem with AI will replace your work is that it feels like it shouldn't be a bad thing for the people who get replaced. If more people don't have to work, then they should still be able to live.
You'd think that, but that's not what we want, because we live. Have you ever like looked at, so for example, a lot of companies have been doing like a back to the office thing. And when you ask why, they give a bunch of reasons, but none of those reasons use metrics. And the reason is because every single metric that exists says that the most productive time in office work history was during COVID, right? It says that people who work fewer hours tend to be more productive in the hours that they work. It says that the majority of office, and there are exceptions because like hard labor or, you know, a daycare worker, we're not talking about, we're talking about office workers, right? So office workers do not work. If you give them a 10-hour day, they don't work 10 hours. In fact, statistically, whether you give them, and some people say, well, I worked 12 hours and I worked all of those. Even if that's true, you're the exception. All actual measurable metrics say that whether you schedule them for 12 hours or 6 hours, they only work about 5.5 hours.
Well, because stamina exists.
Yeah, focus goes away. Our most productive time, I believe, is between 9 and 12, right? Like we simply just don't have the ability to be productive for 8 straight hours, even with a break in between. And you don't actually receive more money. In fact, in some cases, you receive less. You receive less overall quality. And I remember, because I worked with a company back when I was in sales, I worked with a company who had a six hours, 4 days a week schedule. So you couldn't reach them on Fridays. They were just insanely profitable, and they've never stopped being profitable. They were a manufacturing company of some kind. I don't remember exactly because that was 7 years ago. But like, I remember asking them, I said, how do you do it? And they said, oh, we've done it for a long time. It just works. And there are going to be people who tell me I'm wrong, and they won't have any metrics to back this up, or they'll find some example of some like exception, right? Like some service that provides 24-hour support or something.
I'm
right?
so confused. Why don't they want this to work?
It's what we talked about earlier. They don't want it to work because everyone has decided that your life is measured, its value is measured by how many hours a day for how many years you worked.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize this, but when a whole generation sees that, they become miserable because that's a fucking depressing outlook.
I remember back when the whole Bitcoin thing went off, and there were a lot of young people who just became millionaires off of Bitcoin and were just retired at like 25. And they'd interview these people, and people would look at them like, oh, good for them, but they're kind of losers. And the reason that they're losers in their mind is because they're retired young, and they just like look like a young person who's not doing anything. And there's this emotional belief that they need to be doing something. And it's like, well, why? They don't need to work for the rest of their life. So why would they? What's the point? You know, I understand if you said I'm bored and I don't know what to do, so I work part-time to just fill some time.
Yeah, but they don't need to be on that grind.
They don't need to be on that grind. I read a Am I the Asshole thing one time on Reddit where some guy worked really, really hard to be very successful young. Right. So he had millions of dollars, and then he quit his job, and his wife also worked, but she didn't need to. Right. Because she wanted to have her own career, but he had made so much money that they were multimillionaires. And so he retired. And that was his whole plan. And she knew about that before they got married. And so he did. And then she came home early one day, and he was like high as fuck playing video games, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to get high during the day. Yeah. And she was like mad at him, acting like he was being a loser for not doing anything.
But he worked hard for that.
Right. So what happened is that she's just convinced that you should be working, even if you're already successful. His goal was to work and burn out early to have a ton of money so he could just not work forever. And that was always the known plan. But once she had to see it, there was this immediate reaction like, oh, well, then my husband's a loser because he's not doing anything. And it's like, well, why should they be doing anything? Should they have to? Like, what's the point? Yeah. So that is the sort of core issue with our society now is that everyone has been convinced that your life goal is to work until you are burnt out and have health problems, and in the process produce children who probably hate you because you were never around because you worked all the time, and then maybe leave them a little bit of money when you die sad and depressed so that they can do it again. And if you say it that way, they go, oh, you're being hyperbolic. And I go, how many people have this story? Go listen. Just use your ears. Yeah. How many people, that's the problem. How many people have actually asked another human how they actually feel and listened to what they said?
And it's such a weird idea to me, too, because we evolve away from more work. We make tools so that we don't have to spend more time doing fucking work. We invented a computer to do math for us so we wouldn't have to do it manually to do more work.
Right. Well, people say, well, that was an innovation so you could do more work of other kinds, more important work.
No, it was not. No, it was not. It's like I explain this to people who don't understand why calculus exists. Calculus exists because algebra is too hard for some problems, and mathematicians want to do less fucking work. They want to put less down on paper. The reason why you have letters on your paper is so that they don't have to write the same shit down 50 times.
Yeah. Well, people don't really understand the things that they have opinions on, right? And to wrap this all back around to the immigration thing, that's what the core of what I was getting at in the beginning when I talked about culture, when I talked about people's opinions on immigration, right? And you were talking about how people see it as like the people in power all see it as like, well, it's the economic unit. If the economy's doing good, then we're good. And it's like, that is not, none of these things are innately the problem. Well, the problem is people are unhappy.
I don't think that's what they believe. I think that's what they argue.
Well, yeah, I would agree. So sort of, this might seem like a non sequitur, but I actually think I have an example of this. So I mentioned Stephen Bennell earlier, Destiny, right? And a friend of mine watches him a lot. Actually, the guy who edits our videos watches him a lot. And one of the things I bring up to him that pisses me off about Stephen is Stephen has a lot of pretty nuanced opinions. Lately, we've got a lot of separate opinions, and I don't know what happened. Maybe he's just like, I don't know, gone insane, because we seem to disagree a lot lately. But one thing I've noticed, I've used to watch him a lot back when I was a kid and he was playing StarCraft and stuff, before the politics. But when it comes to money, right? So he has all these nuanced opinions about everything else. He's like really nuanced, able to go really deep and really like suss out the core of something when he's talking about social issues, sexual dynamics, social dynamics, political positions, whatever. And then once it becomes about money, capitalism, his brain shuts off and it becomes like a retarded 10-year-old because he has something about money. And I thought about it for a while and I realized what it is that Stephen grew up very, very poor, right? So, and he worked really, really, really hard, right? So he started his own carpet cleaning company. That was really hard labor. He worked at a casino where he put in like a ton of overtime and it was like a lot of work. And he always grind, had a kid, had to grind for the kid, was an unplanned kid, right? Not that he doesn't love his kid, but it was like, grind. And then he kind of hit the jackpot with streaming. Right. And then that worked out really, really well. And then he's continued. But then through his own effort, he shifted from just being a video game streamer to being a political streamer. And he's continued to grow and grow and grow. And he's put a lot of effort and time into that. And so what's my point is that now when it comes to money, there's a emotional attachment to his success. I grinded really hard to get this. So my decisions are good. And I think that, and I don't know him, right? I've never met the guy, right? I'm just psychoanalyzing long distance. But I think what happens is that there is a emotional, like, contention where it's like, on one hand, he knows that, like, that he got lucky in some ways and that, maybe he doesn't actually need more and more wealth. But on the other hand, there's this opinion that if you work really hard for something, like what you did was good and it is thanks to you, right? So like he'll defend CEO pay and he'll say like, well, how much should a CEO get paid? And nobody ever responds right because he never argues with people who have actual like experience dealing with C-suite or executives? The answer to that question is whatever is an amount that is both a reward for successful decision making that doesn't come at the expense of the workers.
Yeah.
If you have to be the CEO of a company I worked for recently who doesn't give a bunch of raises and makes a lot of cost-cutting decisions, but then gets so that you can get your $3 million bonus, maybe you didn't need the $3 million bonus.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe we could have just not done those things that harmed everybody else, and you don't get a $3 million bonus, right? That's the answer. The answer is it's not a specific dollar amount or specific percentage. The answer is, in a way that doesn't harm others, you should be rewarded.
And here's the thing about all that stuff he went through. Even if that's not the reason.
Yeah, who knows? He could just be insane. I don't know. Or I could be wrong.
I'm sure there's at least one person who does fit that description. And that's great that he's gone through all these things. It's great that he's come this far. It's great
that he got the good things despite the bad things. Yeah.
And it's great for all that. But I don't think anyone has to go through that to be successful.
Sure. But I guess my point is that people who defend certain positions probably don't, the reason they sound like they're an idiot is because they themselves aren't an idiot, but they internally don't actually have a good answer because emotions are stupid. Yeah. And there's an emotional, traumatic, psychological issue deep down that makes you attached to certain positions or certain ideas in a way that makes you struggle to be intelligent about it, because even though you're smart, following the smart conclusion will result in the opposite of what emotionally you want to be the answer.
Yeah. But here's my emotion coming into this: frustration, because it feels like we can just have this fucking baseline for everyone.
Yeah.
Which is like, and it wouldn't even be that big of a problem.
Sure.
I don't even think, if we look at it like economically, we have this baseline. It's a safety net for everyone. We don't have to worry about going down a specific path or whatever. It's like, it doesn't mean that everyone gets the latest iPhone the next year or whatever. And even if people were to, people are more afraid of people abusing a system than people who need a system benefiting from it. It's like, let's throw that out the window because it's a stupid idea in all cases.
I remember when Bernie was running for office, I think I've told part of this story before. I had two different people that I was close to at the time. So it was during that election and Bernie Sanders was running. It was the first time Trump was elected, right? Yeah. So people were like, why? So I remember on one hand, I talked to one friend and he's an independent, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember I kept saying, well, he's like, these things won't work, right?
Why?
They're going to be they'll never work. And I said, do you have how? And he's like, well, yeah, it's hard to explain while we're just sitting here in the car, but economically they won't work. I said, should we not try them? Or should we just keep it as it is forever? And he's like, but they won't work. And I said, then they don't work.
Then you will see that it will not work.
And then you'll have evidence for the future. But if all you're going to do is say it doesn't work, then it does. Then I don't give a shit.
If we try our fucking hardest and this doesn't work, then fine, I'll shut up about it.
Right. But then in the same note, I had another person we were out having a drink one time, and she said to me, why Bernie? And I said, she's like, I'm a conservative, but I want you to explain it to me. Why Bernie? And I said, okay, listen, I understand, especially from a conservative perspective, that Bernie Sanders seems like an insane radical. But when I want Bernie Sanders, it's because I have grown up and I have watched the same thing play out over and over and over. The Republicans do this, the Democrats do this, and it's always, always the same. He's proposing a lot of radical ideas, and that's scary, and that's good, because the status quo isn't working, so let's try something else. And she's like, okay, I guess that makes sense. So, but what if it goes bad? I said, well, it's not good now, right?
Yeah.
You agree. We already have established that we're not happy with the way things are. It's not working. And she's like, well, yeah. And I said, so if he comes in and his radical ideas make things worse, well, it's only 4 years. He'll get kicked out and we just fix it. But if they work, it's going to be a huge change. And either way, this was the big one I said to her, I said, either way, it's going to shake it up. right? And that's what we really need, is a true shakeup. And people hoped that Trump was going to be a shakeup. He turned out to just be another Republican, actually, right? He turned out to just be Reagan again, because Reagan fucked everything. You know, it's funny seeing Jimmy Carter died, and everyone's like, damn, that's, you know, Jimmy Carter was really cool. When Reagan died, all I saw was, damn, the devil's finally dead, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just rich people with no political backing get into power, and they fuck things up. And then even the people who loved them at the time, they die, and then everyone who had to live with the consequences of that person cheer when they're gone.
The witch is dead.
The witch is dead. Bernie was a shakeup. So whether you agreed with everything or not, at his core, he would have fought to make a change that we need to make.
And I hate the idea of what if it fails. It's like,
what if it fails?
So what?
Let it fail. You know what? I talk a lot about my old job, but I haven't mentioned my old boss, Omar. We used to contend a lot, and I could say some things about him that, ooh, I could just fucking strangle the guy. But one thing I always appreciate about him as a boss is that if I said, I screwed up, I tried to do this and it didn't work, he'd be like, well, that's how we learn whether things do or don't work. Right? You never got yelled at when you had an idea and that idea didn't work. He was always like, yeah, let's try. Let's try was a common statement from him. And sometimes that was a problem, because sometimes I had to explain to him, we have tried and it didn't work, and that's why I know we shouldn't waste time again, you know? But when you wanted to do something radical and everyone else was like, well, that doesn't make sense, he'd be like, well, let's try, right? Because if it worked, it meant we headed down a new path. And if it didn't work, then we knew why it didn't work, right? And we had evidence to back that up. And I think that is the best leadership style in the world, is one where you go, you know what, let's keep doing our bread and butter so we keep the lights on, and then let's try other things. And if they fail, that's a lesson. And if they succeed, that's a lesson. If they only half succeed, then we take that and we can mold it into something that will succeed, right? That's a very, very intelligent way to do things. And it's something that I think I've only had one boss, and that was him, ever do. And and the reason that's so rare is what you just described. Why don't we do it? Well, everyone's afraid. Nobody knows how to deal with failure. Failure is scary.
Well, because we never deal with it. It's the chicken and the egg problem. If you never deal with it, you'll never learn to not be afraid of it.
This is a really good point. Mike and I, on the way over here, were talking in the car, and he brought up the fact that you know, it feels like what people do whenever you have an argument with them is they eventually peter out, right? You make a really strong point, they have no rebuttal, so they peter out and just go, oh. And then like 3 months later, they start the same argument as if you've never had that argument before. It's like argument gaslighting is the term we use. Now, what I said to this was, well, this is that people can't admit when they're wrong, and they can't digest that and turn it into a future right. Instead, they're like, well, I have no argument and I'm ashamed and I don't like it, so I'm just going to try to like let it leave my mind so I can just like pretend to be right again.
And then they reboot it.
Yeah, they reboot. And I brought this up as an example of like when so I've had fights with friends in the past where they felt that I never admit that I'm wrong. And I go, no, you just never pay attention, because when I'm wrong, I don't really have much of a reaction. This happened when we were at the Christmas party, and you said something about electricity conductiveness that I didn't know.
Yeah, distilled water doesn't conduct electricity. It's the minerals in like non-distilled
water. Yeah. So I said, you know what? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then that's it. So when I don't know something, I don't feel ashamed for not knowing it. It's information I didn't have. It's now information I do have, which will help me be right in the future. And so here's what happens psychologically. When I feel that I am right, I stand my ground and I have a strong argument because I've spent a lot of time thinking on it. And it's going to take a very compelling thing to convince me otherwise. I'm probably going to need evidence, not just an opinion, right? So people get mad because I don't concede to them, even when they feel like they made a strong argument. It's like, right, but you didn't convince me. So they're mad at me. On the other hand, when I'm wrong, I concede without emotion. So The first time, it records in their brain. I had this strong argument with Kevin, and I'm mad at him for that. But when I concede, it's super nothing burger, so their brain doesn't even record it. They don't remember it because it wasn't a big argument.
Because it wasn't a victory. They didn't hear da 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 da.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't have any of that. The chocobo doesn't run across the screen. Like, you don't. They didn't fight me for an hour, and then I go, you know what? You're right. Instead, it was like, oh wow, yeah, I'm wrong. And then and that was it. And so it doesn't record in their brain, and that is. The problem is that, so I don't have a problem being wrong because that's like how I was spent most of my life wrong before I started spending it being right, and it's true though, right? Like I spent the majority of my life being wrong until eventually I spent it being right.
Damn, like it's crazy how that works.
I know. But other people don't know that. They're ashamed. Their ego can't handle the idea, oh, I was wrong, or I didn't know something, or I looked foolish, right? Well, you were a fool through most of your life.
They didn't understand the scientific method.
Yeah, they didn't. And so they dodge it. They just want to dodge wrongness. They want to dodge incorrectness. They want to dodge these things. And so nobody has learned how to fail. They have no clue how to say, oh, yeah, it didn't work. Right? Instead, they've got to talk their way out of it. They've got to come up with something. And if they didn't think of something, if they were just like, if they had a stupid moment and they just like didn't think of something, then they're like, I don't, they go like, well, I have to pretend that I actually have a rational reason why I didn't try that.
It's interesting. This is a point of contention that we come across every time that we talk together, is that people are just afraid to talk about, like, to accept that they have failed at something. They're too afraid of it.
Yeah, they are afraid of it. There's a lot of things people are afraid of. They're afraid of strong opinions, so they don't like it when you feel sure about something. I run into that a lot, is that people get mad at other people just for stating something confidently, because I don't know, there's like this desire to have everyone, like, if you want to make a statement, you have to like do it with a bunch of like soft, like you have to like approach every person you're going to express yourself to like they're a rabid animal who's about to shit, piss, and scream all at once if you get near them, and then rip your head off. No, you have to give them a bunch of gifts and tell them how big their cock is before telling them that you think something is a certain way. People are afraid of failure. They're afraid of ever feeling like they're wrong or that their ego is going to be hurt in any way.
People are afraid of feeling stupid.
They're afraid of feeling stupid or looking stupid. Oh, yeah. Shame is such a silly thing because no one's opinion matters. Actually, like they don't actually matter. Even mine, I'm on the better opinion. My opinion doesn't matter. Like you do whatever you want with your life. It only matters if it helps you. Does my opinion help you? What I would argue is if you watch this video and you've listened to my opinion, you either look at it as a tool of, okay, I'm going to look at his argument, I'm going to look at what he said, and I'm going to figure out how I would rebut that in a way that isn't just lol, you're dumb, right? Or you're a neocon or some buzzword. Make an argument. Talk to yourself as if I'm there and come up with an argument. And if you agree with me, listen to what I said, record that, and then in the future when you need to express yourself, you have a library of information that I've provided you with to use, right? Instead, people go, well, I'm going to shit my pants. I think that's the solution. When, you know what I'm saying? Like when I hear an argument, whether I agree with it or disagree with it, I try to use that as a tool, right? And I don't just get upset or have shame about it, and people are always afraid of, well, I have to be right the first time. I have to do something right the first time. No, failure is how you eventually become successful. You're wrong until you're right every time. That's how it always is. It's the same thing like so I said this to Mike on the way here, and I've said it to you before. The correct and incorrect don't matter. Only the result. So what's the result you want? The correct thing to do is whatever gets the result you were looking for. Right? And So being correct is irrelevant. It's just working towards achieving the result you're looking for, however you get there.
Yeah, and bringing that back is like, what is the result we're trying to look for
in society?
In society.
In society. Yeah. Joker paint goes on. Yeah. You know, like, yeah, no. What is the result that we're looking for? That's a good question. I would say a lot of people don't know the answer to that question because they've been so indoctrinated. I hate that word because people are going to like react emotionally to it, but that's what it is. You've been convinced, you've been brought into a mindset.
The problem is, even if people react emotionally, it doesn't make it the wrong word to use.
Right. Well, yes, but there is no such thing as correct and incorrect. There is only the result you're looking for. And the result I'm looking for is that the message gets across. And the message I want to get across is, if you have an emotional reaction to an idea, you should spend time thinking about why that is and asking yourself, is it important? Does it benefit me? I used to have a lot of values, right? 10, 15 years ago, as a teenager, you know, as a you know, fresh 20-year-old, I had a lot of opinions and values that were strong, right? But as I've gotten older and explored those ideas and challenged my own feelings and my own opinions to form better ones, I've found how little a lot of things matter. I remember actually one of the only comment on one of those shorts that Silver put out of the show. Some guy said, I'd mentioned like offhand, I'd said subjective morality, and out of the whole short, the only thing that guy took home was that morality is not subjective, and because we don't teach it, that's the problem. And it's like, how do you teach something that is subjective? It is, of course, subjective. You teach your morals to your children or to other people, but those morals are not grounded. Like this phone is a physical reality. It's an object that exists.
There's a misunderstanding of how common sense works, which is interesting because
I know where you're going. Go ahead.
I don't think you actually do. It's like my dad asks like about all like these physics concepts and how and he says like how do things work this way out in the universe? How do we know this? And it's like, I think my first reaction was that the universe was not made for you to understand.
Right.
And you can only see things from your point of view. So you can't pull yourself back. It takes strangely, a lot of decades of studies and testing to find that things are a bit more complex than they first seem. And that's why Newton was not really wrong about his idea of how rotation and gravity works. He just had a smaller picture and a smaller amount of information than Einstein did when he found out about relativity. And then Hawking had a bigger picture from a lot more scientists, all this collated data, which he could come up with to give information about black holes and stuff.
Right.
And it's the weirdest thing that we ignore the number one benefit we have as a human race, which is that we have so much information to draw upon. Yeah.
Common sense is only common
because someone
learned it from a source. Someone is teaching you. If that teacher is Wikipedia that everyone has access to, it's still not something that existed before. The term common sense is somewhat of an oxymoron because there's an assumption with common sense that you should know this no matter what, but common sense is all things that you have to learn somehow. It's just, the reason it's called common sense is because it is a belief that it is hard not to have learned this in the modern age, right? So common sense dictates that if you don't know something, you pull out Google and you look it up, right? But that is only because in the modern age, everyone has access to Google. And someone had to have told you that. If someone never told you to do that, you'd never think to do it.
Yeah. And babies learn all the time. It's like hot pan is hot by touching hot pan and learning, oh, shit, that's hot.
Yeah, it's common sense that a pan is hot because almost everyone has either been burned or watched someone get burned.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know that innately. It's not... That's the thing. People think common sense is innate. It's not. It's just that it is an understanding that in the current age we're in, it is common to learn this easily.
And I'm going to go back to babies real quick. It's interesting because some of the times when babies get hurt, they only cry, but if you are looking distressed, they don't actually know how to react.
Yep.
Which is very interesting because you think, oh, I got hurt, I must feel bad. But babies don't think that way, which is very interesting.
This happened with my little nephew, who's like 2. Is he fell over and everyone started laughing and going, "Oh, that's so funny!" And everyone in the room just started and just started laughing and going, and then he started to cry, and then he started laughing. Right? Because he didn't hurt himself. All he did was fall over on the carpet, right? He was fine. But so by us having that reaction and getting excited and like saying, "Oh, come on, come back," and he was like, oh, actually I'm having fun. This is a game, right? And that's exactly it. He's learning whether he had a trauma or not. This is a real thing, by the way. Have you ever seen it online where someone talks about an experience and they say, "I didn't know I was so traumatized." And what you realize is that they just weren't traumatized. What happened is a bunch of other people convinced them that they were, and they incepted themselves into being traumatized.
Yeah, it's always stupid all the fucking time.
Like, I'm not saying people don't get traumatized about bad things, but it's like you'll watch someone say, "I didn't know," and we're not talking about they had a trauma that they buried. We're talking like the experience just wasn't that bad until everyone told them it was, and they like worked themselves into an upset that they didn't have about an experience, whatever that was. Or they like just, to them it was like, yeah, it was bad, but like I'm over it, like it wasn't that big of a deal. But then a social circle like works them into it until it was like way worse than it was. So it wasn't I was uncomfortable on a date. Right? It was like, that guy is horrible and might like be a secret rapist. You know what I mean? Or something. You see it all the time.
Yeah.
People look to other people to decide their own feelings for them.
Yeah.
It is interesting, which goes back to the very beginning of, I don't even really know what Sam Hyde's opinions are, because everyone's just telling me he won't tell you anything. I mean, he'll tell you something, but like, if you pay attention, it all seems rather...
Well, here...
like buckshot, you know what I mean? Like, who knows where it's going to hit?
Well, here's the thing. Everyone in life can lie to you.
Yeah.
And even in this show, the best thing you can take away from things are the things that most benefit you. So the thing that most benefited me from all the shit Sam Hyde said was that stuff about an economical unit, and that other stuff about like the grind set is stupid. Yeah, no, I agree. You can take the truth doesn't stop being the truth just because of who said it to you. Yeah.
And that is always something that you can benefit from, is to just listen, take it in, and either form, as I said, you form an argument as to why you don't agree, and that equips you, or you take that in and you use those pieces and you leave out the not useful stuff the next time you need to make a point yourself. And that's just rhetoric. That's communication. The greatest thing that the worst communications teacher I ever had, I had this communications teacher in college. He was just abysmal. I mean, just bad. But he did say one thing that I was like, that's true. That's actually true.
He communicated to you.
He communicated one thing that is probably it's weird. Everything else he taught was useless garbage, and he should be ashamed and I hope he's not working anymore. But this one thing was true. And he's always said, you can never know for sure what's in another person's head or heart. Even when they tell you something, you don't know actually what it is. So you can make assumptions, you can believe someone, but you can never know for sure what they said. Yeah. So you have to just operate off of what you think is best and what makes the most sense to you. Yeah. And that's how I tend to operate with almost anything. So anyway, I mean, we've been going on for a while now. I think we've covered this topic pretty well. Do you feel you've expressed yourself on this topic as much as you'd like to?
Yeah, I think just about everything.
Yeah, just about everything. You're very passionate today. I like it. This is rare. Passionate Mansour. Strong opinions, strong feelings.
I have the passionate glasses.
You got the glasses on. Oh, now I get it. You got to wear the glasses. It's kind of like when I turn into the cooler Kevin. You're turning into the more passionate Mansour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you made it to the end, which I probably didn't, thank you. Hopefully, you'll leave a comment and it won't be schizophrenic, but if it is, I'll probably only reply with the title of the channel, which was the funny. I was so excited. That's the thing. I wasn't upset. I was waiting for someone to get mad at our channel one day so I could just use the title of the channel in the reply. I was so happy. You should have seen me at home. I was like, I get to do it. Because I am a bit of an asshole. But thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.